For any of you that have tried to get on and got booted off, we appreciate you joining us. We still have a couple of board members or a board member that is still trying to rejoin. If you could be a little bit patient and wait for us, I would appreciate it.
Mr. Christensen is coming into the meeting now.
Great. Well, thank you for your patience with us and our technical difficulties. We would like to call this meeting to order, and if we could have a roll call, Ms. Richardson.
Jesse Campos.
Present.
Steve Christensen. His audio is connecting now. Sherry Lincoln.
Present.
Scott Lehrman.
Present.
Amy Phillips.
Present.
Maxim Karashve.
Present.
Isaac Matakin.
Present.
Edgar Quiros.
Present.
Thank you. We would like to have an approval of the regular meeting minutes of May 15th, 2020. Can we have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the meeting minutes from May 15th, 2020.
I'll second the motion.
We have an motion and a second to approve the regular meeting minutes of May 15th, 2020. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Christensen. Ms. Lincoln.
Yes.
Mr. Campos.
Yes.
Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Lehrman.
Yes.
We will move on now to audience comments and turn the time over to Superintendent Whitney.
So by way of agenda review, there are no additions or changes, and we will not be requesting an executive session after this board meeting, and there are currently no audience comments to be read aloud.
Thank you. The consent agenda includes personnel and warrants. Can I have a motion in a second?
I move to
Have the additional items been removed? The budget status report.
Did I miss something?
yes, I see on here it says monthly budget status report and conditional certification.
Okay. Guess what? I printed off the wrong. Oh, I don't know what I was doing. I printed off the wrong agenda. So monthly, let me reread that then.
So it's personnel, warrants, monthly budget status report, and conditional certification. I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second motion.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented and amended by one of the board members. Can I have a motion and a second?
We did.
Oh, I already did. Mrs. Richardson, can you do a roll call, please?
Mr. Christensen. Ms. Lincoln.
Yes.
Mr. Campos.
Yes.
Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Lehrman.
Yes.
Okay, I will turn the time over to Ms. Whitney to announce the rest of the agenda?
Thank you, President Phillips. It's my honor this evening to have Kevin Hebden with us tonight, who's going to present some information about the November of 2020 bond. Immediately following Kevin's report and discussion with the board, I will be presenting the Pasco School District's COVID response in looking and reopening our schools in the fall. So with that, Kevin Hebden.
Thank you, Superintendent Whitney, President Phillips, members of the board. Looks like Mark, I need you to grant me access to share my screen.
All right, give it another shot.
Okay, hopefully everybody can see that just fine. Again, good evening. It's my pleasure to be before you this evening and to present to you an update on our November 2020 bond. At this presentation, we'll be looking at some background information, current considerations, want to talk about voter sentiment, bond market, construction and commodities, project timeline options, and we've got a recommendation, and then we'll entertain some questions and allow for some discussion. So along the lines of background information, just as a reminder, on July 23rd of 2019, the board approved the long-term facilities management plan. To move forward with the projects outlined in that plan, the board engaged in a series of discussions between September 2019 and January of 2020. At a regularly scheduled board meeting on January 28th, the board approved a motion directing staff to prepare for a bond resolution for a November 2020 bond election. And just as a reminder, the projects and the scope included our third comprehensive high school, athletic fields, field turf replacement, CTE modernizations and enhancements at both of our current high schools, Chihuahua High School and Pasco High School, and then land purchase for a total of just over $100 million. The Comprehensive High School Number 3 Task Force has been working in partnership with MEC and DLR architects to collaborate with stakeholders in the design of the new facility. Some of you on the board have participated in that, and I know that our student reps have been very active in participating in that. With a successful bond, just as a reminder, if we were to have a successful bond in 2020, the third high school would be in operations in August of 2023. Just a reminder of the timeline. So that was the plan. That's where we were, and then we've had a worldwide pandemic that has significantly disrupted schools, governments, business, and industry. And just to give you a little bit of background on some of the unemployment rates that have been realized of recent, in the US, unemployment rates have jumped from a 3.5% to 14.7% just in recent months. And then locally, COVID unemployment is already over 4 times higher than recent Washington economic shocks. We went back and we're looking at the Great Recession, the time frame of 2008 to 2010, and so the state of Washington is already 4 times over those rates. Then bring that down even to the closer local level, our unemployment rates jumped from 5 to 6% in Franklin County to about 12.6% since the pandemic began. The short-term and long-term impact will be significant. A lot of unknowns, depending on the duration, and those impacts are yet to be determined. With these changes, district staff has consulted with bond counsel and our financial advisors to provide an assessment regarding the planned bond election. So I'd like to share with you some of the information that we received in our research and our outreach to those professionals. We perceive that voter sentiment is down as unemployment is up significantly. Voters are cautious and feel a bond may not pass in the near future. Of all the considerations in talking with our professional partners, of all the considerations like the bond market, looking at the bid market, commodities market, all those considerations, the consultants that we spoke with shared that voter sentiment is probably the most important thing that we need to consider in going out for a bond. Again, looking back at 2008, 2009, when we passed through challenging times, we look to the past to see the past can sometimes foretell the future. So in that U.S. Recession of 2008 and 9, on average, only about 40% of bond election attempts passed in Washington state. Community information and outreach and voter education under the current stay home, stay safe orders would be another challenge that we would need to overcome as a school district in attempting to pass a bond. So the bond market, if there was a silver lining in the current conditions, the bond market would be that silver lining. And speaking with Piper Sandler and Northwest Municipal Advisors and Foster Garvey, they share that the lending rates are down to almost historical lows. Bonds are selling if voters approve them, and there are more bidders than usual in the recent sales of bonds. The bond market is favorable to borrowers. However, they also shared that as they're experiencing historical lows, there's also still quite a bit of volatility in the market overall, as the duration and total impact of the COVID economic pandemic is uncertain. Something else we wanted to look at and consider, let's say, okay, we were able to be successful in November 2020 bond. What would our project kind of look like? So consulting with our construction folks and our estimators to see what impacts we might have if we got past an approval, and then looking at the construction market. And the estimators are very uncertain and very uncertain in this environment, not sure what is it going to be an increase? What are the prices going to be? They're really concerned about the manufacturing, the availability and the delivery of those commodities and materials that we would use to construct a school, and sharing that those are unreliable at this time as far as their availability and timelines for delivery. The timelines, depending on how long the COVID pandemic continues and the economic downturn, as well as our stay home, stay safe and things like that, depending on how long that goes, it just makes it even harder and harder to predict what the future might hold in all these different aspects. The construction costs just recently have increased anywhere between 10 to 15%. So that would be an increase to our previous estimates on a high school number 3. And the district has already begun to see delays in current projects that are under construction due to the pandemic, with the increased measures of screening employees on the work site, added measures, social distancing. All those things have started to creep into our projects and cause delays and possibly added costs. Another factor that we looked at was a state match, and in looking at that, the state is sharing that they're seeing an increase in the requests and a decrease in funding. So the allocations to us might be a little bit tighter than previously known to be available. So then we wanted to talk a little bit about our project timelines. If we were to go out for a bond, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, in November, we would be able to open a school in August of 2023. Then if we were to move to a February 2021 bond, it would push that out another year to August of 2024. And you can see the rest of the dates there. In August 2021, we would be able to open in August of 2024. November 2021, we could still open a school in August of 2024. But then if we push that out to February of 2022, that would push our project out to a completion of August 2025. So given all these considerations and the current impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, staff recommends the board postpone the November 2020 bond measure. This is a report, and we'd like to have a discussion here in just a few minutes, but I wanted to share with you, based on the information we're seeing, it would be our recommendation that we postpone the bond. The challenge is okay, if it's not in November 2020, when would that be? And at this time, it's just too uncertain to give a specific date. So then what would we do? In the interim, there's quite a few things that we as staff could continue to do. It's not that we will just put this on the back burner and wait to see what happens. We will continue to do our high school planning work, and we will continue to have our fingers on the pulse of the market, working with our advisors to then bring to the board a recommendation for a future bond election. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions, facilitate any discussion. Essentially, our next steps would be after this would be to come to you as a board and ask for a decision at our June 23rd board meeting. So I guess what information might you need in addition to what's been provided tonight in order for you to make a decision on June 23rd? Thank you.
Hey, Kevin, this is Scott Lehrman. Thank you for the presentation. What kind of I got kicked off and missed part of the presentation, but is the decision you're looking for just to postpone it indefinitely, or are you looking for us to come up with another date?
No, it would not. We would just ask for a postponement, and then we'll do some further analysis and continue to keep our finger on the pulse of the markets, and then come to you with a recommendation about when we might consider running for a bond.
Thank you. And then the second question I had, I missed this part of it, so you might have already said it, but I was just interested on the voter sentiment. I know you said the voter sentiment was not, I don't know what the word is, positive toward this right now. Was it a survey that we did, or did we talk to our panel, the local people that how did we get that data?
We did not do a survey. That has been just in conversation I've had with people in my circle of influence, and understanding in general what, as the unemployment rate is high and money's not in people's pockets, it just doesn't seem the right time to ask voters to support a bond at this time with other priorities.
Kevin, is it also true that you used the recession of 2010's data as a predictive set of data for what may occur on the back of this particular financial crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking back at what was approved during that 2008-2010 timeframe, provided by our financial advisors, that a 40% approval rate was about the average for bonds at that timeframe. So as they're comparing the current economic situation to that timeframe, because that's the most recent one we have, that might be an indication of voter sentiment. Any other questions, concerns, comments? Or additional information you might need to help you make a decision?
One thing that I am concerned about that is how, if we postpone this bond, how will we go about keeping this fresh in the minds of our patrons? Because this school is needed. And shortly after that, we will need another middle school. And that will put us down around about within 15% over capacity in all of our buildings, which would be ideal. That might not be ideal in other places, but getting our schools within 15% of capacity would be ideal. So this is a need. There was so much excitement from the board and the community over a CTE focused, well, obviously we're always focusing on college, but to have an additional focus on CTE with this new school, and then improving the CTE programs at our other schools. There were some exciting things that were happening with this bond that really play into what the economy needs and what our community needs. So how will we keep these things fresh in our voters' minds?
That's a great question, President Phillips. And I think it was just earlier today, Michelle and I were having a conversation about that. The excitement, the progress that we had, the long-term facility management plan that we had a community group working so hard, and then brought that to the board, and it just felt like we're making great progress. And this is a decision we don't take lightly, or a recommendation we don't take lightly, because of that momentum and that progress that we've been making, and the excitement around the things that we're doing. And it's a fine line of we need the school. We are number 1 and number 9 of the largest high schools in the state of Washington. That's not a statistic that we're super excited about. And as far as enrollment goes, and so yeah, the need is there. And in our discussion, we were kind of talking about, well, maybe this isn't the priority right now with the pandemic, health pandemic, and there's other priorities and needs of our community. Some of the work that we would continue to do, absolutely, we don't want to just put this on the back burner. It's important that we keep moving forward with the planning and then trying to figure out when is the right time, working with our advisors. I don't know if Michelle, you had anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think it's a difficult question to answer right now, Amy. We and it'll become more clear during my presentation that I'm going to do next. Our entire system is kind of lined up and focused on how do we get school opened in the fall. So I think that that's probably a fairer question for us to bring back a more in-depth plan to you once we get at least a plan for the fall, if not kids back to school in the fall, Amy. But I think what's important for the whole board to understand is it's top of mind for us. We are proud of this work. We fully recognize the need. We're excited about the momentum and the trajectory behind the way that the bond project's lined up for our community. We believe in the work. We just really need to be solely focused on creating some predictable and sustainable school access for our kids. And then we definitely will pick up those operational aspects of the organization that we also believe in. So it's a difficult question for us to answer right now, just with the uncertainty of what the summer and fall will bring. But we just want to assure you as a board that it's top of mind for us, and that it's not a priority that we'll just shelve. We're proud of the work. We recognize the need. And when it's right in terms of kind of community readiness, organizational readiness, we'll absolutely pick it back up and continue to run with it.
Thank you. Considering the last bond passed by 7 votes in a booming economy, is indicative of the fact that this might be a tough pass. It's difficult in a community that is growing as quickly as ours, and our needs are ballooning as quickly as ours. We were actually building to make up for some of the time that was lost, and I hope that our community can get there again. But I do understand that the families in our community and and the struggles of have to be kept in mind if this will be an undue burden on many in our community. So I do want to keep that in mind, but I also want to keep it in the mind of the community that how important this is and how badly this school is needed. So I appreciate your words.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments before we move on to the next presentation? Okay, we'll turn the time over to you, Ms. Whitney.
Okay, so I'm hoping you can see my screen and I'm hoping you can hear me. Is that true? Okay, good, thank you. So President Phillips, members of the board, it is my honor to be here tonight and talking to you about reopening Pasco schools in 2020-2021. We just finished the third of 5 collaborator meetings that we had over about, oh gosh, a 4 or 5 day period. We've been extraordinarily proud of a partnership that I'll highlight in our presentation that will end with, again, a series of 5 meetings and collaboration with over 250 stakeholders in helping to frame and inform our next steps. So my purpose tonight is to present that work to you. This will be the first in probably a number of presentations that I'll be doing with you as we're preparing to open the fall. And the frame that we're really thinking about is how we build a resilient school district. And I think the term resilience we most normally hear when we talk about human beings, that we want resilient students, we want resilient adults, that when they bump up against a barrier, a challenge, that they have a deep toolbox full of tools that they can apply to that challenge so that in the face of barriers that we don't break, that it doesn't deter us from reaching our goals, but that we have a number of things we can do when we bump up against a challenge. We don't normally talk about it up against organizations, but the same is true for organizations. We really need to build in some resiliency. And if you think about school districts, I was reflecting on this, we're a particularly rigid organization. If the weather's not, if the weather's too poor, we have 2 choices. We either cancel or delay school. That's really the opposite of resilience. Really what you want is a continuum of options so that when unexpected or unscheduled challenges occur as an organization, we can be agile and nimble. So as we look at moving into the fall, that's really our goal, is to build some resilience into our school district so that we can be nimble and agile and maintain high quality education and academic services and social emotional supports for our students. So just by way of background, our community health conditions locally and statewide are still really causing uncertainty for school districts, and it's requiring school districts across the state and locally to look at a non-traditional start to the 2020-2021 school year. So in order to help inform next steps, the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction has convened a stakeholder work group to inform recommendations and guidance for school districts as we plan to reopen. This work group is a broad work group, and it consists of about 150 educators, educational leaders, elected officials, community-based organizations, parents, students, and community members. I actually am serving as part of the 150, so I've been proud to be part of that work. It's been very instructive and informative. I've met amazing people from across the state who've been very innovative thinkers as we've partnered in looking at what reopening could look like. From that big group of 150, a smaller subcommittees are focused on different aspects of reopening, like instructional services, social emotional services, transportation, facilities, and finance. I am on the social emotional services small work group. Our meetings actually concluded a week ago. OSPI right now is working on taking all of the information from the meetings and distilling that and synthesizing that into a body of recommendations and a guidance document. We are expected to get that guidance document this week. I just received an email from Chris Reichdahl yesterday expressing that they are working hard on it. They're almost there, but for us to have patience, and that we'll see it sometime this week. Just again, for some background for you, as we're talking about and thinking about this concept of organizational resilience, we're really needing to think and talk about preparations being made along a continuum of options that are really based in county and health guidance, county and state health guidance. So I'd like you to look, when you're looking at this chart, not to think of it as silos, but really think of it as a continuum. And we as an organization are going to need to be able to be agile and move through this continuum, maybe as a whole district or maybe as individual buildings. And I'll explain that a little bit. So you can see face-to-face service delivery. We are still holding out the hope that there's some miraculous recovery from the virus and we can all be back in the school building. I can be standing in front of 1,200 people and at the back to school rally in August and giving everyone hugs at the end. That's still our hope and dream. I'm the eternal optimist. I'm holding on to that, but we also recognize we have to be practical and pragmatic. So if we can't do that option, perhaps we could do some kind of on-site face-to-face service delivery that would allow us on a rotational schedule that would allow us to have smaller groups of students in the building at a time to allow for social distancing, to allow for appropriate health screening and so forth. So that's an option that perhaps we rotate our kids. Maybe there's a group of students that come on Monday. That group goes home, works on a robust homework component, while another group comes on Tuesday and so on and so forth. Another option might be that same model of face-to-face service delivery on a rotation schedule, but instead of students just working on homework while they're at home, they're also then engaging with the teacher in some way with some kind of an at-home learning platform. That's a 2.0 version of our current at-home learning. We know that we learned some things this spring. We know that there are improvements that can be made, and not improvements as a criticism of what we did in the spring, but fully recognizing that we're a learning organization and we want to constantly continue to better our practice. So this would be an opportunity for us to then hone our at-home learning into kind of a 2.0 model. So some students would come, teacher would interface with them maybe once a week. Other students would be at home engaging online in some way. Or our community health conditions may require us all still to be at home. This continuum idea, so let's play this out a little bit. We come back in some kind of a face-to-face delivery where maybe we're all back together, or maybe it's this on this rotation and perhaps we get a positive COVID case in one of our schools. The public health guidance will likely say that as a school, we would need to shut down for a period of time and we would need to clean that school. So maybe the rest of the district continues in whatever scenario we were working in, whether it's face-to-face or online, but that one building would shut down. Students would go home, engage in at-home learning until they could come back to a clean school. The other thing I think is a real consideration for us is there will be some families who are not comfortable sending their kids back until there's some guarantee through a vaccine or a treatment for the virus, and we need to honor that family choice. So we will probably need to maintain an at-home learning component for some time. We also will have staff who may have underlying health conditions that require that they stay at home until, again, there's some certainty around the virus. So these are the 4 scenarios that we're asking our collaborators to give us some input and information about. So while we're waiting for OSPI to do their work, we're not just sitting back on our heels and waiting, we are getting to work. So in the meantime, Pasco School District is partnering with our district learning team. Just by way of reminder for the board, we have a partnership with our Pasco Association of Educators. Their executive board leadership and our district office leadership have partnered over the last year or two in what we call a district learning team. And the focus of the district learning team is to create a culture of we to better support you. So we've done a lot of listening together, and as executive leadership for the district, both for the district and the union, we're working in partnership on some priorities that were identified through some listening tours that we've done. So because of that partnership, that collaborative partnership already, we invited them to help us facilitate these collaborator meetings. And we also elicited some help and support from the ESD 123. They actually helped design the collaborative protocol for us, and they are doing all of the Zoom, behind the scenes Zoom technical support, which we really appreciate. It allows those of us who are presenting or facilitating to focus on that and not worry about kind of the moving parts of navigating Zoom. So it's been a huge support for us. So as I mentioned, we have 5 collaborator meetings. The collaborators are our staff, certificated and classified, and leaders, and district level leaders or building level leaders. Also, parents and students have been invited to participate. We've had 5 meetings, or we will have 5 meetings. One that's focused on elementary instruction, one that's focused on secondary instruction, and one that's focused on the whole child or social emotional learning supports. Then we'll also have one, we've already actually done the elementary and the secondary. Elementary was last week, secondary was yesterday, operations was today, and tomorrow we have both whole child and public health. So it's been a heavy lift for us as collaborators, but it's been extraordinarily informative, and the collaboration has just been fantastic. The purpose of these collaborator meetings have been really to identify the lessons that we learned from the spring of 2020 to help better inform our planning for reopening of our school in the fall. We've spent time together creating a shared understanding of what our mission calls us to do in the face of this pandemic. Public schools have a role and a place in this pandemic, and our mission is something that we believe deeply in. And so we want to hold it close and think about what is it that our mission calls us to do that may or may not be different in the face of this pandemic. And then we've really framed the first part of this collaboration around determining key system and human needs that we need to consider once we get the guidance from OSPI. So we're not launching right into solutions. We're getting really clear together and building a shared understanding about what kind of system pieces need to be in place and what do our staff, our students, and our parents need from us in order for them to be successful in those 4 scenarios. So the first collaboration is really around building the shared understanding of need, so that when once we get the OSPI guidance and we go to solutions, that we're building better solutions on behalf of those we're in service to. So the next steps once we get that OSPI guidance, we're going to absorb and understand the OSPI guidance. The bullets, the guidance from OSPI will come in the form of guidance around instruction, assessment, and grading. They'll give us guidance around technology, learning and learning management systems. They'll give us guidance around social emotional supports, operations, and public health, which was very important to us as superintendents, that the public health partners were right there with us in lockstep with OSPI, so that both the academic guidance and the public health guidance can be kind of woven together to create a system for us to bring students back. So once we get the OSPI guidance and digest it and understand it, we're going to crosswalk the needs that have surfaced in our collaborator meetings with the OSPI and public health guidance. And our hope is that some of the needs that our collaborators told us were important, that we needed to find solutions for, that the OSPI guidance answers some of those needs. So perhaps we get OSPI's guidance, we understand it, and we can cross off some of the needs that we already identified. And then where we still need to develop and implement action plans, then we dig into that. So again, so we would be planning to implement the OSPI and public health guidance where it solves a need, and then where a need still exists, we would engage in solution finding in collaboration with our stakeholders and collaborators. Again, we will need to continue to communicate with our stakeholders, our board, our employees, and our students and families. And then we will need to engage our labor partners regarding any mandatory subjects of bargaining that come up as we're looking at what the opening of school looks like in the fall. So just a few harder timelines for you. I wanted to remind the board that in May, We did conduct a parent and staff survey about at that time how people felt our at-home learning plan was going for them. So we still have that robust data set that we're continuing to look at and will help us and also inform our planning moving forward. As I stated, between June 4th and 11th are our collaborator meetings. So we'll be completed with those by the 11th. So I guess it's not tomorrow, it's on the 11th. So those will be completed. So over the course from the 4th to the 11th, we will have engaged 250 of our collaborators around these questions that were designed to surface needs. We'll receive the guidance from OSPI as I described this week. And once we get it, we'll engage our cabinet and leadership teams to understand and absorb it and start doing that needs crosswalk. And then we're going to dig right in with convening cabinet leadership teams and building administrators during the week of the 5th through the 9th, or the 15th through the 19th, which then positions us to be back with you on the 23rd to bring you up to speed in terms of where we are with any recommendations and seek direction from you where appropriate on the 23rd. Then during June, July, and August, we'll continue to find solutions where we need to and continue to communicate. Our goal is to have a bulk of the work done or a substantial amount of the work done by the end of June. It's a lofty, lofty goal, but we feel like we need to set a lofty target and try to meet it because our labor partners will need time for bargaining, mandatory subjective bargaining. Our parents are going to be interested, and families are going to be interested in what the fall is going to bring, and we want to provide certainty to both families and students as soon as we can. So those are our next steps. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions from the board on this plan to move forward this year?
I have a question. I saw the continuum there, and on the far right, saying that let's say that we can't go in for full face-to-face contact. As a parent, and I think there's a number of parents that would agree with this, it'd be good to have, I don't know if I say a majority, but a good portion of every day, if we can't have face-to-face, have the kids online, not doing the kind of online learning they did now, but online with instruction coming from the educators. And I hear the partnerships with the state and OSPI, but I guess my question would be, I think the local universities and community college, so CBC and WSU Tri-Cities, rolled out some kind of platform fairly quickly. Is there collaboration with them and the local high schools to understand that platform, or are we waiting for guidance from OSPI to say we're going to use some other kind of platform, or is there work being done now or planned to be done in being proactive to ensure that a efficient online actual interfacing with the teachers system is available for the fall?
Yeah, so there's a lot of parallel work that's happening. A number of our teachers have been attending Jeff Utek's bodies of training, which is about exactly what you're talking about, narrowing the platforms that we're using, being consistent with the platforms we're using. I can't remember the number, but it's hundreds and hundreds of teachers have gone to his trainings this summer. It is coming up as a very clear priority already in the collaborator meetings we've already had, that we need to get narrower in the platforms we're using so that it's more efficient and streamlined for parents, students, and teachers. So there's work already being done around what platforms will that be. Chiawana High School, I know, has had really great success with Canvas, which I believe is the same platform that WSU uses and maybe CBC. So there is some parallels. So again, though that work is kind of being done simultaneously. So when I talk about surfacing needs, that has already surfaced as a need. And then that solution finding will go back to the instructional team and engage teachers around what does that look like. And some of that work has already started. We knew it was going to need to happen, so we didn't wait. I think the other piece that I wanted to add that's not directly connected with your question, but we are going to be, I think one of the things we need to understand is where our parents in their thinking about what they'd like for their students. So we need to survey our families and ask them, based on the community health conditions, do you feel comfortable having your students in some kind of face-to-face learning environment? I've gotten a lot of direct emails about people's feelings around that. So we need to provide a streamlined opportunity for all parents to make their wishes be known. So we will be working on that as well in June and potentially the beginning of July. But yes, Scott, to answer your question, that work has been happening. There's a recognition that it needs to be streamlined, and it very intentionally calls out at-home learning, which is the technology component, as being a 2.0 or an improved or an evolution of what we're currently doing.
Thank you.
Oh, the piece I wanted to add to the Jeff Utek piece is not only have we had teachers already going to his trainings, there will be more trainings coming up. Teachers continue to sign up, but we also engaged with Jeff Utek about potentially coming to some of our professional developments right before school starts. We have some tier days. So we're still in the tentative planning around that, but we would really like to see him engage directly with PASCO staff. And if he was able to do that for us, we would differentiate that professional development. So those teachers who have already had him would have kind of like the 201 level instead of the 101 level. And those teachers who haven't had the opportunity to see him would have kind of that 101 level. So it would be differentiated. So our hope is to be able to provide that through line between the training that teachers already have had around his approach to online learning or technology-based learning, so that we're just continuing the momentum that we started this spring.
Is he offering that training online, or yeah?
It's
You
online.
have to enroll in it. You enroll by the student.
I'm sorry?
Do you have to enroll by the student, or is he willing to provide it to all? Like if district staff was decide that was a value, you could hire him to provide that training to the entire district.
Yes. Yep. And that's exactly what we've been talking to him about. And so now it's just about identifying dates and kind of making sure that, he can be available on the dates where our professional developments are happening. You may have remember him. He did a presentation at WASDA last year, or the year before, and he was really about how do we use technology innovatively as a support for student learning. He did the keynote actually. He was maybe it was 2 years ago. Last time it was in Spokane, I think. He did the keynote. He's very engaging, very innovative, and he's very timely for us. So it's been, and then Mark Garrett had brought him to our district when we launched the one-to-one initiative at the high school level. So he's not necessarily new to all of our teachers, but the message and the professional development has been hugely supportive. And we actually used some of his partners' work in how we framed the asking for needs before you got to solutions. So again, there's just that nice through line. So there's some consistency in approach, and so it's kind of layered and makes sense.
Is this kind of at-home learning going to facilitate our kids' learning so that they will not be so dependent on parents? I've talked to several parents that work, and many of them have simply said, we can't do it. Our kids just aren't doing this, or not to the level that they need to be. And I get that because I spend so many hours per day just helping my kids with their at-home learning. So are we going to be able to get to that point?
So that's definitely come up in the needs that, like, as I've processed through already the feedback from the elementary and the secondary instruction, that staff and the people who are participating, our collaborators, are very mindful of the impact of parents. And so certainly they recognize that as a need to build a system that's easier for parents to navigate. So that has surfaced as a need, and then we'll turn it over to some collaborator groups to problem solve around, but it's very clearly a need, and staff and community members and parents vocalized it during the collaborator meeting. So that's definitely the goal. Any other questions I can answer?
Thank you so much. We're hoping that that chart leans more to the left than the right, but I personally appreciate all the work that has gone into being prepared for any of those scenarios as the district continues to navigate this difficult time.
Thank you.
Well, we have 3 graduates this year, and in our board representatives. I hope all has gone well for each of you as you have begun to celebrate that wonderful thing a little more in solo than we originally expected.
Yeah, it was definitely nothing we expected even 6 months ago before Christmas. My graduation already happened. At Delta, we held an online graduation, a live stream on June 4th. So I'm officially a graduate now.
Congratulations, Mac.
Thank you. And despite of this whole situation, I'm still looking forward to my college year. So I'm really excited for it.
Congratulations.
Me too. I really enjoyed our Saturday senior fests. They were a little bit different, but they were still very special. I really enjoyed seeing all my teachers and receiving honor cords. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think that's gonna become a tradition now. The parade and the little going around the school waving to your teachers. I feel like it'll stick by.
Yeah. You know, you guys are living a part of history. You'll always remember this. You will have maybe the most unique graduation of anyone or anyone that has ever had. So even though it's tough, it's kind of cool being a piece of history.
Yeah, I'm still hoping to have a actual graduation ceremony in 4 years. So I still have a chance.
You do. Yes, you do. All right, thank you. Thank you, board members. Thank you, district staff. Thanks for all that you're doing. I know that there's a lot on your plates right now, and we appreciate all the work that you are doing. I'm going to turn the time over to Ms. Whitney for future agenda items.
So as I mentioned or alluded to, I will be back in front of you with an update on how our reopening schools for 2020-2021 is going and give you an update. I should be able to identify some themes that came up in each of those 5 meetings that I just described. We're also going to be starting the budget planning process about the same time every year. We start that process with you as a board, so Kevin will be back in front of you. So it's actually kind of a repeat of the same exact board meeting with slightly different content. We'll also be asking you to take action on the recommendation that Kevin provided you about postponement of the bond, the November bond. So we're going to be asking for action. So we'll have 2 reports and an action item. Again, as I've mentioned before, this environment we're in right now has caused us to change and shift our landscape quite frequently and quite quickly. So this is our plan as of now, but we'll have agenda setting on Tuesday, and if something changes, we may need to adjust. But for now, this is the plan for June 23rd.
Whoops. Thank you. Thank you for all that have been here. We're glad that you could join us, and this meeting is adjourned.
Hey, happy